As a Christopher Nolan fan, it's easy to say that I was anticipating this movie, especially after just having rewatched Oppenheimer, which for me is an absolute 5 out of 5. It felt like this movie had the potential to be one of Nolan's best before it even came out. The energy around it was just so exciting. Sadly, for one fan, and seemingly only one fan, that just didn't turn out to be the case. But let's start with the positives, because there are many. Nolan leaves no room for interpretation that this is indeed an epic. The production, the scale, the action sequences, it's honestly incredible. The grueling backstory of how the film itself was made, testing its actors, testing its crew, a camera that required 5 to 6 people to move it, that's pretty insane. I do believe that this is a blockbuster in the truest sense and should be viewed on the biggest screen possible. The cinematography was stunning. Apparently there were some gripes about that online, but I had no qualms with it. I thought it was beautiful. It looked real, the world felt authentic, and nothing ever felt like it was CGI, which is pretty incredible when you have some magical moments in a film like this. The performances, of course, were on par with what you'd expect from A-list actors. For me, though, and I think with many others, the standout was Himesh Patel. There was weight to the character, and he personified the burden that these travelers were bearing. Ludwig Göransson, of course, didn't miss with the score. It's beautifully haunting and I think perfectly fitting for the film. The action sequences were incredible and completely engrossing, but I think what took me by surprise was the element of horror, which is something that I just did not expect at all out of this film. One reviewer I follow, Jeremy John, said this: "Nolan makes magic in this film terrifying, and it should be terrifying. You feel like you're having the same existential crisis that the characters themselves are having, and that's a big thing. It's rare." I couldn't agree more, and these were the scenes that had me on the edge of my seat. So 2 more positives before some of the critiques, and I would say that this is a spoiler warning. We're getting into spoiler territory here. I absolutely loved the framing of the fall of Troy. I hadn't read the Odyssey in high school like I think many people have. All I've ever seen is the movie Troy, but we all sort of feel like we know these stories because we've heard retellings of them so many times over. But my fiance spoke to this really well as we were leaving the theater, comparing the fall of Troy and the Trojan horse to Original Sin, which I thought was pretty incredible. And since that comment that she made, I've watched a few review videos that said the same thing, and I really loved that narrative arc in the movie. And it was a way of viewing the story in a totally new light for me. Lastly, I have to emphasize how much I greatly respect the cast and the crew that made this film. It is absolutely a work of art. So let's get into some of the negatives here. The edit, for one. Karsten Rundquist, a reviewer I follow as well, had this to say: "When I zoom out, the film does feel just a little clunky. Not just the first act, which feels a lot clunkier than the rest of the film, but throughout, it feels a bit like a collection of individual sequences that are masterfully cut in their own way, but how they all culminate in a single piece feels just a little pasted together at times." This editing technique worked so well for Oppenheimer, and I think it crystallized it as a masterpiece, as an instant classic. I just don't think that it serves the Odyssey in the same way. For a 3-hour movie, Oppenheimer felt lightning fast and so smooth and seamless. While the first 2 hours of the Odyssey are equally quick, I would say, the third act really wasn't. It felt incredibly slow and drawn out. I do think that the story would have been better served building some more of the character development in the first or second acts, as opposed to spending as much time in the third act as Nolan did. The problem for me was I just craved so badly to care for these characters, but it never felt earned to me. I was just expected to care for them because they were familiar names that have been around for thousands of years. And this really gets to the heart of the issue for me. While this film is clearly very personal for Nolan, it never connected with me in that way. In comparison, I think of a scene from Interstellar, where McConaughey's character, Cooper, is watching the lives of his children play out through a screen, knowing that he's missed years that he'll never get back. That to me was the emotional epicenter of Interstellar, and you felt it. It was tear-inducing. There were a couple scenes that felt similar to this, like they were reaching for that level of emotion, but I don't think any of them quite landed the same way. But these 2 were good scenes. The first is when Odysseus is tied to the ship as they're passing the sirens. That one was really, really powerful and very beautifully done, and the score at that point is just, it's perfect. Secondly, during the fall of Troy, when we see the slave girl being murdered, and then later finding out that that was the embodiment of Athena all along that we'd been seeing, that to me I think was one of my favorite parts of the movie. And I felt like I got what Nolan was going for in that moment. So shifting to accents, something a little more lighthearted. I have seen some people say that the American accents were meant to be a reflection of America's fall from grace right now in the current moment. And while I can respect that, I do feel like it took me out of that ancient mindset, out of that time and place where this story was meant to be happening. And yes, I know to be truly authentic, they should have been speaking Greek, but if you want to enjoy a movie without captions, I think that the English accent is kind of the best proxy that we have. The irony about this is I've made fun of this so many times that we have English accents to portray people that would be speaking Italian, Greek, or another language. But again, I think it's sort of the best we've got, and it is conveyed well in the tradition of cinema, at least. And maybe it's also because it feels distant and somewhat unfamiliar that it sort of evokes that more ancient feel. That brings me to Dad. That's something that I didn't notice. My fiance called it out after the film, and again, that just sort of takes you out of the time and space where these characters and stories are meant to be taking place. In retrospect, that's a call that I don't really love. At the end of the day, this movie got people thinking, it got them talking, it sparked discourse. For all of that, I can applaud it. There are so few monolithic events in our culture now that I feel moments like this that bring people together at scale are very important. So for all of that and for all the positives and for many more, I have to give this a 4.0 out of 5. Also, I have to say this, the last thing I want to do is detract from anybody else's enjoyment of the film. I just want people to feel seen if they felt similarly to me where, maybe you're a Christopher Nolan fan and you expected a lot out of this movie, but ultimately you were left feeling a little disappointed and maybe you knew why, maybe you didn't. Hopefully this video helped you feel seen a little bit. Nonetheless, I'll be here eagerly awaiting Christopher Nolan's next film. If you're still here, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I really appreciate it. Let me know if you'd like to see more like this or something similar. Thank you again, and I will see you in the next one.